everybody. I want to call the Wednesday, June 25th, 2025 meeting of the Charter Revision Commission to order. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the last two meetings. If it's okay with you folks, I know I haven't had a chance to read them yet, so I hope that we can just wait till the next meeting and approve the minutes. Does anyone have an objection?
No.
Perfect. Is there any reason to modify the agenda? Does anyone have anything they want to change? Seeing none, we'll go right on to old business, which is to discuss the form of annual town meeting. And Maya and Joy, for the last meeting, have come back with their thoughts and recommendations or suggestions for us to talk about moving towards an open town meeting. And for people in the room, there's some documents here on the edge of this table or what we're going to be referring to. So Maya and Joy, take it away.
So our process was twofold, I guess. One was to go through and identify every place in the current charter that references RTM. And that's the spreadsheet. And I think no matter how careful we were, I think we missed one. But anyway, I'll talk about that when I get to it. The things marked in purple are places where we actually wrote some draft language just to have something to talk about. I think we talked at the last meeting that it's easier to talk about stuff if you have something written in front of you. So what we're gonna do, and I will start, is to start with the spreadsheet. And the first item is Article 1, Section 1A.
I mean, Article 2.
Article 2, excuse me. Article 1 is the history.
Good, I had a question about that, but
So that is the definition of general town meeting.
now, general town meeting, I think is election day, so I don't think we can get rid of that.
Well, we replaced it with something else later on.
But
That's probably B. Section 2, Article 2, Section 1.
Section 1,
right, but 1A is the actual, like, March, for the
yes,
March
yeah,
election, so we don't wanna take that out.
we,
The definition of representative town meeting.
but the general town meeting, we substituted. I'm suggesting that we remove it. We can leave it if you want, because I have in section 3B, I have some replacement language.
Right, and I have questions about that too.
How do we wanna proceed? Do we wanna talk about each one as we come to it, or do we wanna go through the whole thing?
Well, that's my question. Maybe, I don't know what the best way is, because I have a question about that one and I have a question about the section 3B, unless we wanna just go. I don't know which,
I think
what do you think?
because
Would you put this
it
together?
is like a spider web, right? You
Yeah.
pull on one string
Yeah.
and the other ones get implied.
Yeah.
So I guess if the comment or question is implication for a second thing, hold
Okay.
until it's discussed later. If
Okay.
it's just purely about where it's located, what the place that we're on, then address it there. So
Because at this point, I didn't see those two being connected. I had questions about both of them, but I didn't see them being connected. So
to
it all-
something else.
Right, I didn't see
Okay.
section 1A being connected to the thing, it's the other thing. So maybe
we'll
we
get to it. We may get to it.
Yeah, so maybe I should wait until you folks tell me how they're connected.
Yes. Can you do that?
Yes,
I think it'll, okay. Now, you might not agree.
Yeah.
With how we have it connected.
Right. Right, but I didn't even know it was connected until now, so I've learned something.
Yes, okay. So, Article 2, Section 1B. We have suggesting, that's the one about representative town meeting. And we're suggesting that,
So now this is your attachment, and for hopefully ease, the language is in red with a potential green. This is not meant to be a final version of anything, it is just something to read, and it's so you can compare here if you don't have your charter.
okay. So then we have Article 2, Section 2A, which if we're not gonna have representative town meeting, it's still on page 1. If we're not gonna have representative town meeting, then that should just be removed. Article 2, Section 3B, which is on the second page of the charter. And we have draft language, and it's the second thing on the Word document, where we're gonna delete and replace. So the replacement language is in red. Is it right?
Red is what's being deleted,
Yes.
green is what has the potential of being added.
So that's where we put the language that replaced that 1A. So on the first Tuesday in March of each year.
Do you mean 2A?
Can we speak to that now?
No, we're just gonna go through it all and then we're all gonna talk about it again.
No. I'm talking about,
Right, but we're gonna have, Maya's gonna go through and just outline what they did, and then we're going back through and gonna talk about each thing.
so we removed section 1A, which was the
Yeah.
general town meeting.
Yeah.
And we put language in a new section 3B, Article 2, Section 3B,
Yeah.
that says what happens on the first Tuesday in March. And we may need to leave some of the other language, but we can talk about that.
I'm sorry, it's just that section 2 starts with the exact same language that you're seeking to replace. So I'm trying to understand, so, but you're saying you wanna put that in section 3,
Right.
but you're gonna leave section 2.
Section 2, where?
Section 2, right at the beginning, on the first Tuesday of March, the voters and youth voters of the town.
Right, that's why I'm getting.
That's why I'm confused.
Right, should we just keep going through everything then come back, because this is the one I'm getting confused about too.
Where are you talking about? Right here.
Section 2, before the first subsection.
Page 1. Right there, here.
To
Well, if
A.
Well, here's the other,
that's 2A,
right,
and we're suggesting we remove it, you can still have on the first Tuesday in March,
right.
show elect, and the select board, and the listers, and the.
I understand that, but what you're saying to replace is in section 3, and it's the exact same language, so I just wanna make sure I'm clear that that's what you wanna do.
Well,
And
we may or may not.
do we wanna just, because I have a lot of questions about these too, do we just wanna keep going and we can mark what our questions are so we know what ones we have to go back to? So we know we're going back to those, to have further discussion.
Article 2, Section 3E.
That's page 2.
We left, it's at the bottom of the charter changes. And we added Human Services Committee because we're proposing that they be voted on by Australian ballot. And we removed all the language that had to do with representative town. Okay. Article 2, Section 4. That is all about representative town meeting. So we'll
And potential replacement would be the green
the
on
green,
on the back of your handout.
so those are the things that we took a stab at writing language, because there are just too many references to RTM in this charter.
Yep.
And so we made some comments on the other sections. Okay. So Article 2, Section C, and that's the section on the Finance Committee, and that has to be rewritten. 'Cause I think we want to have the Finance Committee in the charter some way, but it talks about the high school and it talks about all kinds of things that don't happen anymore. So the whole thing needs to be.
We had started a draft.
We had
of plans.
started, yeah.
Yep.
Article 2, Section 7D, which is on page 3.
Page 4.
4. Oh. Did I have the wrong page? No, I didn't. Sorry. Didn't catch that. And that's the section on library trustees. And we didn't know how the library trustees wanted to be elected. Section 8, Article 2, Section 8. That's consolidation of services. And it needs to be rewritten.
We've had a discussion about that.
Yes, yeah. But we haven't finalized any language.
Right.
Article 2, Section 10. We need to take out representative town meeting, just take out the reference. Are you doing Article 3?
Yeah, I can.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, Article 3 is all about powers of the people. So a lot of this is just the references to RTM, as you'll see going down. So Article 3, Section 1B has a reference to representative town meeting at the end of that statement. So then that would be like a removal. Article 3, Section 2, then A, subsection 2, also smack dab in the middle, has it reads the warning for the next annual representative town meeting, again, a reference. You'll see again, Section 2, subsection B, subsection 3. Again, is a reference to representative town meeting, as well as 4, subsection 4, binding initiative passed by representative town meeting. Again, that would need to be rewritten, removed if possible, obviously, as long as it's cared for elsewhere. Section 3, so it's the bold, section 3, also has special representative town meeting, these are all just instances of being referenced to town meetings. So section 4, again, bold, it's a referendum section, says also, our warrant article taken by representative town meeting, and again, be there at least 50 representative town meeting members. These are all just references. Now page 6, so Article 3, Section 5A, it carries over. Again, is town meeting members. So just making sure that these things are cared for, trying to list all the places where things pop up, or TM pops up.
So Article 4, the powers of the select board. Section 2 says that RTM shall fix the compensation of the select board, and it can go to either Australian ballot or open town meeting. Joy and I kind of put it under Australian ballot.
Yep.
Article 4, Section 5, F, 9 and 10, which is on page 7. But they could be changed to open town meeting, and
I thought we had discussed possibly removing the entire list.
yeah, we put it as a consent agenda.
So it can sit either place,
Either way.
something to chew on, but at least knowing it shows up and something that would need to be moved.
Because we did vote to remove that entire section F already.
I don't know if we voted.
We didn't
We
vote,
discussed
we
it,
discussed.
and then several of us have some follow-up work to do,
Right.
redraft some things, and then we're gonna vote. But I think we can speak to that when we get looking at your green and red
Yeah.
language.
Let's see, where am I?
Article 5.
5BG. Page 10.
That's page 10.
Page 10. It's actually G and I both have an RTM reference.
G and I, yeah.
So
And
again,
it's mostly removing the reference and trying to figure out how we're gonna handle special appropriations. Who's gonna vote on those? Article 7 on page 12. Is under section 3, there's 3A and 4A on that page that both reference RTM and the school directors, so they need to be removed, and we suggested they be replaced with open town meeting.
Okay.
And then Article 8, which is charter amendments. We kind of talked about that a little bit already, but it talks about RTM. So we need to talk about that more and rewrite it. And then Addendum A, if we do away with RTM, that whole thing needs to go. So this is, it's not necessarily, I have to say, what I'm advocating, and it's not what, I don't think what Joy is necessarily advocating, that we make these changes. It's just we were tasked with putting something in writing and so we could have something to chew on.
We appreciate that because it gives us a starting place, which we didn't have before.
Yeah.
So thank you. Now do we want to, I feel like this is a good place. You've given us lots of things to think about and to go through and to center ourselves around something, which is open town meeting. So do we want to go through and just sort of talk about some of the things that just came up I mean, I feel, maybe I should ask everybody this question first. Based on what Joy and Maya put together, is everybody feeling comfortable that having this discussion about moving towards open town meeting and going through this tonight, something we wanna do? I know I do.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. We don't wanna do it for nothing, but I think we're all on the same page. Perfect. Okay, so should we start from the beginning and go over some of these things that we were just talking about?
No, I understand your question about Article 2, Section 1A, and it could, I mean, I suggested that we delete it, but we don't have to. I mean, it can stay.
And
I am not able to find anywhere where this general town meeting term is actually used elsewhere in the charter.
No.
It seems like it's some sort of like vestigial definition from something that
yeah, so we
was
can take
probably
it out.
around before. I do think that we should, instead of calling it open town meeting, just call it annual town meeting, because that's what the statute
Yeah.
calls it.
Okay.
And that would also make it very easy for us to amend a lot of these other sort of
Yeah.
procedural changes where we could just take out representative and replace it with annual. If that's what we choose to do in terms of like leaving that power with the town meeting.
Mhm.
But that's my only suggestion with regards to that. And I don't even know that we need a definition of annual town meeting because it's defined by statute, and we have other provisions in here that make it clear that youth voters are included in legal voters of the town, which is what the statute defines it as a meeting of the legal voters of the town.
Do you think we should put something, like a lot of this, I know we're trying to get it down so it's an easy document to read, but in some cases we put a definition in so that it centers the whole town on understanding what we're talking about during, and that would be my reason to put in a definition in the town meeting, so that we all know, Peter. Oh, no, you go ahead.
I think we should come back to definitions. I think we should actually work on the substance of these questions, and then when we've landed in a place, we can decide whether we need definitions to provide that clarity that you just described.
I
Or
like-
whether we don't need any definitions at all because the sections speak for themselves.
I like using annual town meeting because, I mean, we've been referring to it as open town meeting, but
It's a hand.
annual feels better to me.
And I feel good with passing on the definitions to deal with the meat to determine. So moving on to the stuff that's gonna take a moment.
So, Article 2, Section 3B.
Now, I don't know, this is on page 2, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So my reasoning or my thoughts on this one was that section 3 is about the manner of the election, like how somebody is elected. And what you folks have drafted is not the manner of the election. It's what happens on the day. I mean, maybe I'm
Yeah.
overthinking it, but it's the work, not the how it happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure what the solution is. I think we'll get there. But substantively, I agree with that concern. I also want to say I'm perfectly fine with defaulting to the standard statutory language of annual, subject to I want to have a better understanding than I have right now about what the statute says is done in-person annual versus Australian ballot annual. It feels to me that's fundamentally what we're wrestling with in this, what you brought forward, and you brought it forward because of all the communication we've had around it over the many months. And so, so long as we're able to distinguish between those things that we think are important to consider in the in-person meeting versus those things that are important to consider on the Australian ballot, So long as we can differentiate between those in our charter, I'm fine to just use the term annual town meeting. But if annual town meeting encompasses both pieces, we might need to be more specific.
I understand your confusion, Kate, and I can't really remember, to be honest with you, why we substituted that for this. I think the important thing is that we're deleting that language and,
Well, that's why, yeah, it just is in.
and then the Australian ballot stuff, can go wherever we decide it should go.
And I don't know if this is the time where we want to wait a little bit before we discuss, because this opens another can of worms, actually the idea of an Australian ballot and what's gonna go on it. Because that, we're gonna, if we, I don't know if we wanna just go through the stuff that we have and then come back to that, because to me, this is a fundamental question as well. So it's how people wanna organize our conversation, is do we stop now or do we just look at the purple things here and then
Well,
come
that's
back
one
to
of
this
the
question?
purple things.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, do we look at the other purple things, because to me, it's very fundamental, like, the road, if there's a fork in the road with, if we do Australian ballot, which we do now, we have to keep saying we do it now, what things are on it, and do we put things on it? And I can give you, again, on my opinion right now, and it'll bring us down the road, but I do not think that we should put a lot of things on an Australian ballot. I also don't think, I believe, we know bond issues can't be done for what Bob said to us.
They have to be Australian.
Do you want me to speak to what the statute says?
Yeah, that would help.
So basically, the default is that it's an annual open town meeting unless the town votes to do other things by Australian ballot or unless things are required to be done by ballot by statute. I think that's why bonds are required to be voted on by ballot by statute. So there are certain things that have to be done by ballot, but unless they have to be done by ballot or unless the town votes otherwise, it is all assumed to be at an open meeting.
Okay.
Well, so the reason why we made up this list was because we've heard a lot of commentary about people wanting to have some say in certain things. And I think based on conversations among the commission members, we did not want to put the budget on Australian ballot for all kinds of reasons. I mean, people might disagree with us, but I think that was kind of where we were landing. And so I tried to think of things that would give people some meat without. So that's why I did the list.
And I appreciate that. I just don't think that this serves, to give, just to. I think we have to go all in or not at all kind of thing for open town meeting. Because I think to say to people, well, we're gonna do an Australian ballot on how much we pay the select board, it just doesn't seem, I think I don't see anything here that can't be decided at open town meeting.
No,
And
I agree with that, but we have been talking about doing some kind of hybrid, and that's what we worked on.
Right, and I get that, I'm just expressing my opinion on not putting any of this stuff on an Australian ballot. I particularly
Well, we
think.
have to put bond issues
No, that's what I mean, only things that we have to, which would be a bond issue.
and charter amendments.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's multiple ways that a charter amendment can be handled, and that's dealt with elsewhere in statute, so I don't really know that that needs to be,
And elsewhere in the
Stated
charter, unless
charter.
we change it.
yeah. Because that makes it seem like you could just put it on the warning and then it gets voted on.
Yeah.
And there's very clear procedures for how that gets done elsewhere in this statute,
And-
or
and-
in the charter.
Yeah, and I think this is where I got confused too, because, or, I don't know if confused is the word.
Don't ask me why we put human services members on there.
Well, no, but
But
when
we
I,
do.
and see, to me, this language is, you know, when Peter's talking, and I think I got this based on what both Peter and Hannah said, you know, the general town meeting is what you're describing here.
Yeah.
It's when we go to the polls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what the general town and by this definition of general town, I'm just, right now, it's like, this is what we've got now. General town meeting means you go and vote and act stuff by Australian ballot. And then what we're talking about is adding to that an open annual town meeting, whatever we're talking about. So to me, this is almost all and Hannah can correct me on that, in some ways it's unnecessary because we already have it in the charter to do an Australian ballot election. But
Right, I mean, I think we have to identify what gets voted on by Australian ballot, because otherwise you can't. I think the better thing to do would be to build off the existing list and decide what, if anything, needs to be added or removed from that, rather than, and maybe it's that these two sections will need to be kind of reworked, like, I mean, it seems like maybe Article 2 and like the subsections maybe need to be like retitled or reorganized, like,
yes,
it doesn't seem like it's very logical the way it's laid out.
right.
Yes,
I agree with that.
But
I agree with that.
I do think that what is presently in Article 2, Section 2, I mean, like, yeah, because if we got rid of like voting on the select board by ballot, then it would, you could let these like nominate people from the floor and vote on it, and like nobody wants that, I
No.
don't think.
No, we're leaving, we left that.
Right, but so I don't think it makes any sense to have that same language in two different sections of the
Okay.
charter.
Totally agree.
That's fine.
I think we should try to arrive at substantively what we believe is the right place to land without worrying too much about the language and the organization of the sections. And then when we've made decisions about substantively what we think should be in here, we can get language, you know, next time or sometime soon to look at it and see if we think it accurately reflects. Because there's some work that we're not going to efficiently do trying to move
No, things are.
paragraphs around different sections and things.
But I think like the question where, because I started it, is where does the Australian ballot fit into this whole thing? You know,
And go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, for me, it's the open town meeting and not putting all this stuff on an Australian ballot, because that's where I am right now. Maybe other people won't know where they are until we get further down talking tonight, but I'm just gonna put it out there.
I'll say I agree with that, and that helps us decide what needs to be changed and what doesn't need to be changed, but it doesn't land us in the place that provides, for instance, the clarification that we were just talking about. So
Yeah,
that's why I think
I
it's two
think-
steps.
yeah.
It's deciding things like what you just spoke clearly to that I agree with. So we see whether or not we need to have more discussion around that or whether we're landing in a place together on that, and then we can do that with other questions as well. But when we've landed substantively in the conclusion of the questions, I don't think we should try to get the language done tonight. I think we should come back and do the language to reflect those decisions.
So I'm sorry, I think I was confused, and I probably confused everybody by putting the changed language to replace Article 2, Section 3B, and it should have probably gone under section, as a new section under Section 2, where it talks about what happens on Australian ballot. So, sorry for that confusion, but,
So I guess the question should be like, we should talk about what goes on the Australian ballot.
yes.
Right, that's
That's
the
right.
question.
And so clearly, representative town meeting does not go on Australian ballot because
No.
we're gonna not have it. But there's sections B through E. And I have a note here that we should either reference the section on elected officers or list them all here, because this is an incomplete list of who actually gets elected.
Right.
We had that, that's our notes to figure out.
But see, but that's where it's back to
Right.
the form of it can be decided
Right.
better, I think, in drafting, which we then look at together, as
Right.
opposed to in this discussion, because I agree with everything that's just been said.
Yeah.
And depending on where we land on the question of what else we think belongs on an Australian ballot, either there's just deleting A and we're good to go, or there's something more complicated that needs to happen. But if there's something more complicated that needs to happen, trying to draft it tonight is going to be expensive.
I'm not suggesting we draft a type, but
I
I'm
know
also
you're not.
not suggesting we just delete A, because
Yes.
I'm saying we should either just
Yes.
reference the statute or list all of the elected officers
Which
instead of
A?
just
Totally.
half list.
I'm agreeing with that and saying
And I think we
that-
need to decide which it is so we can see what that looks like.
Which A?
Page,
Section 2.
Oh, section 2.
elected officials, and A is representative town meeting members.
Well, if we're not gonna have, that's out.
Yeah, we know
Right.
that. I think Liz
That's
wanted
the
to
one
say
we all
something.
agree on.
We're gonna try to continue the conversation here, but we'll let Liz, because you've been raising your hand. We're just on a roll here.
And again, and you can hear me
Oh,
from
yeah.
wherever you are. My name is Liz McLaughlin, I'm the chair of the Brattleboro Select Board. I understand how hard this is, and I appreciate it. And I understand that it's a new thought process to get beyond representative town meeting. But when I saw this list, I wondered why we would want to create another bureaucratic elected office, and that the Human Service Committee should rightly be a town committee like all other town committees, appointed by the select board. And if they're appointed by the select board, they can work with the select board. We can provide guidance in terms of ethics that have been of concern to the town, and that they can report to us in a manner that they can be a part of our budget deliberations. And that way it's not after the fact of the budget. It's part and parcel of the budget. And that the members of the Human Service Committee are really easy peasy, appointed just as yourselves were by the select board in an open meeting. And similarly, I would say the finance, when you get to finance, it should be the same, because they can work with us during the budget preparation process. And I also think, well, of course I think that you should have Australian ballot for the budget, but also if you reduced all of these little things like town clerk for a year, blah, 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 they can be appointed by the select board. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, we haven't discussed that.
And then the focus of this annual town meeting is the budget, as it rightly should be. Thank you.
All right, so are we, I just want to step back. Can we just wait one sec?
No, I'd rather not, if you don't mind.
Okay, because
I would like the board to tell us, you said that you want open public. Hi, I'm Tom Franks, District 9. And I'd like you to tell the board, because I thought I heard you raise the question, what do you want to do on Australian ballot? I've heard Kate say nothing, 0. I've heard Pete pretty much say the same thing. I'd like to know, just so your conversation is less painful for you and those of us in the audience, where are you going with this? And maybe you could sort of tell us whether you think, for example, as Liz mentioned, Australia ballot should be applicable for the budget.
that's what we're having a
And you're having
conversation
this
about.
long conversation, but 2 of you have already sort of said what you want. Why not ask the others what they want to do about it? The pygmy stuff that
You have to let us have a conversation.
That's why
I did ask that question.
yes, that's why I'm raising it. Anna asked that question, and you went on to this small thing of a lot of these little things, which basically Maya said they were a SOP because we were told to put something on Australian ballot and nothing important. It's kind of
But we're,
the message I heard. So
we're,
you know, we don't want a SOP.
No.
You know, we want to know what you have against one person, one vote. Tell us that, and then we can move on. If you don't want to tell us that, we will move on anyway. Thank you.
Peter, would you like to say?
I would like to respond to that because the first part of what you said, Tom, made a lot of sense to me about the manner in which we're having the discussion. And we want to not get distracted by the minutia when we have a fundamental question to decide. I agree with that, and we've been starting to try to have that. We've also been, it's not beautiful to watch sometimes, as any meeting of this type isn't. Sometimes we will stray into other thoughts, and so we'll get back on track here in a minute, and Kate will help us determine what on track means. That part makes a lot of sense to me. Your second piece is what inspired me to speak. You'd like to hear from us what we have against one person, one vote. And that's not a fair question. We've been talking for months about this. We've heard a lot from the community. We've had a lot of discussion ourselves. We're very fully on the record around those of us who have a strong opinion that Australian ballot is not the most constructive way to make the complicated decisions like the budget that some of us believe benefit significantly from the interaction that goes on and the ability for the voters of the town in town meeting to be able to make amendments before they take final action, not just have a yes or no question in front of them on a ballot. The framing of the question of what we have against one person, one vote is disrespects the length and depth and intensity of the process we've been through and frames it in an inflammatory manner that I think is not helpful to us getting through the business that you rightly asked us to proceed with in our discussion this evening. So we're going to disappoint some people. There's going to be some people who think that this landed well. There's going to be some people who don't think it landed well. There's a whole lot of people who also thought that saving representative town meeting and putting the work into actually making it better would have been a better outcome. And we've decided not to do that. As a group, we've decided not to do that. We're investing ourselves instead in creating an open town meeting that we're wrestling with together around the framing of.
And can I just say that there will be a vote on whether or not the town should retain representative town meeting.
Right.
And at this point, our job is to provide what we think might be an alternative. Now, the town could well vote to retain representative town meeting. I don't know.
And I think it's important, Timothy, just one sec. I think it's important that when we talk about we're talking about, it's not like I got up this morning and said, hey, I personally like open town meetings, so that's what I'm gonna do. We have sat here and listened for more than a year about the form of annual town meeting. So, and that's why we're having the conversation we have now. And as Peter says, it's like painful sometimes to watch us, but because we have been into this for 2.5 years, there are things that, we've been grappling with on one part of the charter that now impacts another part. That's why sometimes you listen to us going, do these people even know what the heck they're talking about? In fact, I'm surprising ourselves, we do know what we're talking about, So that's sometimes. But that's why, because it's so interconnected. So, we're I believe, doing the job that we've been asked to do. And people will disagree with us or be happy with us, or as the person out there who's probably watching who chased me down in a red pickup truck, who's gonna be super mad at me and I'll get chased down again. But that's what, we committed to doing. Timothy.
Greetings, Timothy Belknap, District 9. At least two of you just showed your cards there, and I understand this is going on 2.5 years, but we just heard everything discounted regarding the Australian ballot. And I just want to point back that you put your own SurveyMonkey out there, 260 people responded to that, overwhelmingly in support of Australian ballot, and with some super valid reasons. There was a point made that those people were super intelligent that responded to that. And the response was, we don't know who those people are. Well, we do based on the responses that were written into those forms, right? If you actually read through and wade through those. So it was 260 people responded to that SurveyMonkey, which is 100 more than RTM. So we've established, yeah, RTM's done, hopefully, right? But my point I'm standing up here to make is that this town, we need one person, one vote, because we have some big city tactics that have come to our town, namely boycotts for people who are just trying to express their own opinions on things around town. And if they happen to be in support of the police, for instance, they can be boycotted. And I would say that's not appropriate for our town. That's not the way forward. And what is appropriate is having individuals go into their little voting booths and vote their consciences, period. And that's why I am full-heartedly behind Australian ballot. And I'm hoping that you guys can hear that based on your own SurveyMonkey, based on your own input, and not just discount it and say we don't want to put anything on there. That's mine.
And I just want to, again, put it in context that we did a survey, which was one piece of a year's worth of collecting information. You know, we had 10 meetings that was on the agenda, and we had meetings where it wasn't on the agenda and people tell us their views. So we're not making this decision in some kind of vacuum. And I won't go through my own personal journey because everybody's heard it before. But ultimately, we're gonna make a recommendation. It will go to a townwide vote, and people may disagree with us, you know?
Goes to the select board first, I might add.
Yes.
It goes to the select board first, and we're gonna ask the select board to accept our recommendations. Obviously, the select board can do with what they want. But whatever charter changes go forward have to be voted on by the town. So, you know, we're doing the best we can, and I think we should keep going.
Again, I just wanna say, again, I put the question out there, what do we want on Australian ballot? No one has responded to me, and I would ask that we be given an opportunity to
Right.
discuss that and not go off
Right.
the offhanded comments of 2 out of a 6-member committee.
Right.
Please, thank you.
Right.
Scared. Let's hear the rest.
Let's get back. Let's get back to going through this. So, the question of what we want to do with the Australian ballot. And are other comments at this point? And what has to be, I mean, as Hannah's saying, there are some things that happen at representative town meetings currently that don't have to happen at representative town meeting currently. That the town doesn't have to decide, basically.
It's a
Right.
separate question though, then.
Well, I'm
It's a
saying,
separate question.
no, but when
Yeah.
I'm sort of saying it in the, and I take Liz's point about I question putting the Human Services Committee on there too, because they'd have to get petitions and things, so we wouldn't wanna put that, I wouldn't wanna put that on anybody. I don't think the select board compensation needs to be on an Australian, I know I'm talking about what I think, but you all know what I think, so. And, you know, I don't know if there are issues other than these that we think, we know a bond issue has to be on an Australian ballot if we have an open town meeting. So that's a definite, has to go on an Australian ballot.
Right, but we don't have to say that.
No, but I'm pointing it out that it has to be.
I also have an issue with this list and with the other list, which we'll get to, but I don't see how I would be in favor of keeping what we have now, which is electing officers by Australian ballot, and as I suggested, that we either shorten or expand this list. We can choose which one we want, but it doesn't make sense to have it be a partial list. And I have been in favor of a hybrid meeting where we put anything that would not lend itself to being amended that would benefit from a debate and an open town meeting on a ballot. And for that reason, I would think that, I mean, I don't know, but I would think that select board compensation is something that needs to be debated. And I would be in favor of putting that on an Australian ballot along with anything else that we feel needs to get voted on that is not required to be on a ballot and doesn't lend itself to amending. But a simple yes or no vote would solve that problem. And this issue of the exact amount to allocate for human services is like, that seems to have been something that got put on a ballot, very controversial in the way it got put on the ballot, and it doesn't seem like that's something that should go here, but that there's other things that I want to hear what everyone thinks, but I'm just sort of trying to get the wheels spinning and see what we think about that.
Well, I'm happy to remove, select board compensation. I mean,
That's the
I mean,
one thing
I
I
mean,
suggested should be on
should be
the ballot.
should be on Australia, I thought you said shouldn't.
Yeah.
Now, why should it be?
Because I don't think it lends itself to amending. It seems like it's pretty cut and dry.
What if the
No.
vote was no? They don't get paid that year?
I mean, I don't know how that, I would assume that
We've had very lively debates in the past at RTM about select board compensation.
okay, then maybe it should
So-
go in open meeting.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with moving.
I just don't really want to build off of this list because I don't think it's very comprehensive or useful.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to clarify something I said earlier. I do agree with you. The reason I agree with you is because I was thinking of it in the terms of when I say you, Kate, comment Kate ran earlier, in the context of what's in front of us
Oh, that's what I was talking about.
this evening. And I want to be clear that the reason why is what you articulated, and I appreciate that you did, about it's for questions to go on the Australian ballot, they need to be questions that can be answered yes or no. And so, I think the select board compensation, I think that the human services items are things that need to be discussed, and there needs to be the potential for amendment on those things. Maybe there are some additional things that we could name and should name that would go on to the Australian ballot because they're so cut and dried, they're yes or no. But based on some of the items on the other list actually being removed entirely likely once we get there again, because we've talked about them before, it felt to me like for what was in front of us, there wasn't anything that looked like it belonged on an Australian ballot. I think the broader question of, well, what if we thought of anything that might go there, I think is a more complicated question that needs time and additional input.
And I mean, so to continue the conversation, I am fine that the Human Services Committee gets appointed in a different way. I do think the list was made an attempt to type out what has been said many times by folks, and to see if the spaghetti sticks to the wall.
Yeah.
And so Australian ballot for these items, B, C, potentially D, let's remove.
Mhm.
It doesn't make sense. It seems like we're getting to a point that says that is to look at the larger statute list, see if there are things that are worth lifting up explicitly in our charter, or just nothing at all, and that it would be time to flip to the other side of the paper and see how that list spaghetti sticks to the wall as far as does it work in an open annual town meeting session or is better on an Australian ballot? Does it build to the list of an Australian ballot? Or are these things that should be dealt with together? Again, to not, so going to the list on the other side, the consent agenda is again to not lose track of the things that are already written in our charter. We don't have to keep them. And it's just again to not lose the placeholder that exists, the words that are there. Could it be done by the select board? Absolutely. It is currently listed, so do we want to have a consent agenda for open annual town meeting? Like that would be the place for it, as opposed to Australian ballot.
The item 6 that I put on the consent agenda, I don't know where that goes legally. That's what I was gonna ask whether Hannah knew.
And also maybe that's an Australian
All
ballot.
of these are things that the select board, that we can authorize the select board to do in the charter, and it doesn't need to be
Or the
on a
town.
consent agenda, which quite frankly seems like a formality, which goes against what we've been saying about trying to streamline the meeting.
Yeah.
And we just
Can we take a
authorize-
minute and just go through each one? It'll take 5 minutes, but I think it might be helpful to just name, because we've had prior discussions about 4 of these, 4 out of the 6. And there's actually some legal input I think would be helpful on the other 2. So,
Yep.
is it all right to do that?
Let's go for it.
So just for the benefit of those of you who weren't here at our last meeting, we already are leaning towards, we didn't take a vote on it, but we talked about it and seemed comfortable with, subject to having language in front of us on a different night and approving that language, that the town clerk and town treasurer would be, we would formalize what has been standard practice in the town for decades, which is the town clerk is appointed by the town manager. It does come for a formality to the select board and then every year for a formality to town meeting, but it's an item that is actually rightly handled by the town manager as being one of the department heads of the town. Town treasurer is language that ties us to some statutory, there's things that treasurers do statewide, but that have been done for decades in Brattleboro by the town finance director. The finance director being one of the department heads is appointed by the town manager. So under the powers and duties of the town manager, number 1 and number 2 could be taken care of and be not a town meeting item at all. Likewise, number 3, but for the select board. In the powers and duties of the select board, the ability to appoint a town attorney and have there be language in the charter that talks about the role of that town attorney, but not have it be subject to the ratification at town meeting, because again, that's always been a non-controversial item that just takes time and is standard business of the town for the select board to appoint the town attorney. I'm going to jump to number 6 because it even more clearly doesn't belong in the town meeting business, because elsewhere in the charter there's actually language that says this exact thing. So the charter empowers the select board to do this if necessary. It usually isn't necessary, thankfully, but when it is, the charter already does that. I have no idea why it has been the practice over the years to be on the town meeting warning. Which leaves 4 and 5 where I don't know, Hannah, I'm hoping you might be able to provide clarity to us, or maybe we need to do a little research. Whether there's anything in statute that requires us to do the approval of the town auditor's report, or to authorize the select board to employ a certified public accountant or accountants, or whether that can be just either handled in the charter or just not addressed because of,
It's already in the charter in the select board section.
it's already in a separate section of the charter.
Yeah,
Okay.
Article 4, section,
But not, so the authorizing to employ a certified public accountant and accountants would be there, but not the approval of the auditor's report, right?
well, it sort of goes hand in hand. It says they shall contract with a certified public accountant to perform an annual audit.
Okay,
And
and if we're silent on the approval of the annual audit, there's nothing in statute that would require it to go to town meeting.
I don't think so. I can
Okay.
double check on that,
So it seems to me that the entire list 1 through 6, rather than putting it on a consent agenda, can just disappear. That's the point.
yeah, I mean, I think that the easiest thing to do would be to just say in that section in the select board, to just say that they not only have the power to hire the auditor, but to approve the report.
Sure,
I'll double check on that.
good, thank you.
Yeah, I put it on the consent agenda because we had talked about that. And so I wanted to list the things that we had talked about.
The way that most of these positions work is that they are either elected or they are appointed, and we're sort of creating this weird hybrid by having this consent agenda, and I think it's cleaner to just have them appointed, because you really don't want those people to be elected, because, you know, you're not gonna get someone who's willing to take the risk that they might get voted out every year, and you could vote someone in who has no idea what they're doing. And I don't think that's in the town's best interest, and it makes sense for these to be appointed positions, and there's no need for them to be ratified.
Totally agree.
So we've got the meeting done already, okay, perfect. Does Liz wants to say something?
I just wanted to clarify my earlier remarks about the Human Service Committee. Not only is it important for the select board to appoint the Human Service Committee, but it's also important for the select board to work with the Human Service Committee to identify how much money the town has to spend and to work with them on the allocation. So all of that should be moved to select board purview during the budget process. So, you know, that just seems so logical to me, and this Human Service Committee could rightly be a tool for the select board, as it should be.
So you would make it part of the budget rather than a separate report?
Yes.
And the Human Services Committee, just for context, the Human Services Committee was established by representative town meeting,
Yes.
as was the Finance Committee. So those are two things that we have to thoughtfully think through, because right now they exist because of representative town meeting. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah,
Human Services Committee exists, but Finance Committee's in the charter.
Right. But what I'm saying, they're, it's like the representative town meeting finance committee, and it's the representative town meeting human services committee. So we just have to thoughtfully think through where those people land.
Right. But why should they, if you abolish RTM, why should they be any different than from the planning commission, from any other town committee that's doing the work of the town, that's appointed by the select board, the planning commission, the DRB, you name it, you have a laundry list that you had the other day.
And I
Just
get that.
add them to it.
Right, I get that. I'm just wanting to point out that there's ownership of those from representative town meetings.
I'd like to actually distinguish between the two, because I think it's an interesting proposition, and I hadn't thought of it until you've now voiced it. So I want to think about the human services piece, because there has been that disconnect between this one piece that's done separately and then the rest of it that's done in the town's budget process. And so I think there's merit to raising it, and there's a history behind why it happens the way it happens that I want to consider before we.
But I also think there's a lot of consternation.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, right?
And
So.
that this would
Yep.
put it in a proper context of the budget.
And I don't agree.
Can I finish?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Because I wanted, the main reason I asked for the floor was to distinguish between the two. I think there's something there to wrestle with, so thanks for raising it. And I'll add to the reasons to wrestle the one you added to the list I was already making. So yes, interesting and complicated, and so I think we should give it consideration. Finance Committee, I think, serves a different purpose, and so just want to be clear, my initial reaction to that is quite different. Happy to think about it some more, but Finance Committee, for those of us who have served in town government, or those of you who are serving in town government, isn't always the most fun part of our job, but I think it plays a really important role that's different than like taking a piece of the budget and handing it to a group of people. It's the group that takes a separate, independent look at all the financial things that the select board is acting on, town staff is acting on, and advises the people, advises where we're headed, town meeting, all the voters, as opposed to advising representative town meeting. But that's why it's been representative town meeting's finance committee, is to provide some independent advice that isn't from, you know, somebody from Montpelier. It's from among our neighbors in town, people who have invested a lot of hours and taken a deeper dive into understanding what's going on with town finances, and providing either a, wow, this is looking great report, or a, you know, we've got some concerns, and here's the concerns that we have for informing the rest of the voters.
Yeah,
So that independence of the finance committee, I think, has been an important aspect of it, and it doesn't have authority over anything in the way that the Human Services Committee does have authority. It's simply taking a separate set of eyes on something and raising observations about it.
Having served on the finance committee, I think that we played an important role in standing back and looking at an overall picture of the finances of the entire town and the budget. And I think independence is important for the finance committee. I think human services, that's a very interesting idea. But I agree with Peter. I think when we start looking at it more, I think we should keep the finance committee in a separate bucket than the human services committee.
Liz.
Let me just say that they can be independent and they can critique the budget, and they can critique the budget in a time frame that's better to work with the select board than be the gadfly on the outside. I just think that's more helpful for the town as a whole, for the finance committee to be right there.
Why don't we talk to the chair of the finance?
And I've been on the finance committee too.
We go to David Levenbach. Are you there, David?
I am very much here. Thank you very much. I appreciate what Mr. Elwell and Ms. Hayagawa have said. And I've been on the finance committee for many years. I think two things. Number one, we do issue our report after the select board has approved a budget for the meeting, but we have been active in the last several years very much through the entire budget process. And as Chair McLaughlin probably well understands, we have spoken up many times in the process of the last several budgets to raise concerns. So the notion that we come in only at the end to throw shade on a budget that has been proposed, I think is an inaccurate statement. I think we have exactly the kind of independence that's been talked about. I think if the finance committee is appointed by the select board, it essentially becomes a representation of what the select board wants the budget to look like, and I don't think that serves the people of the town well. The other thing I would say, because I just looked at the backup materials this afternoon, that's probably a mistake on my part, but this question of select board appointment of the Human Services Committee, I would encourage you to not take a firm vote on that now, and make sure that members of the town and members of the people who serve in the Human Services Committee have a chance to speak to that, because I think there is, between the select board and town meeting, a difference of opinion about how much should be allocated in the budget There's still always the opportunity to amend the budget, even under the proposal for a open town meeting. But I would encourage you to, hold a decision on that until you make sure that all of the public has a chance to know that this is on the table. But the Finance Committee independence, I think, is absolutely vital. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Why don't we go to, is that Andy?
Andy?
I want to stay on track on finance and human services.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay right on track.
Oh, good. Thanks, Andy.
Human services. Out of curiosity, I looked at a town in the area, in this county, that has an open town meeting, and they vote on their human services by actual line item. It's like over 20 articles for each individual organization, and I'm not proposing that at all. I only mention that because the RTM Human Services Committee was created so that we wouldn't have last-minute requests and then long debates on the floor, but that it would be presented as a package. So it was never meant to be I don't believe from the beginning of the Human Services Committee, a vehicle for setting a budgetary amount. That kind of came out, in my memory, which could be faulty, in COVID, when there was a very heightened need for human services here in Brattleboro. Lots of people were helping out and people wanted to raise that amount. But I personally feel that the Charter Commission should consider returning the human services budget amount, the gross amount, to the budgetary process and making it the total amount to the budgetary, because some of the controversy that's going on right now is that it's sort of this free-floating part of the budget that can be amended and changed, raised and lowered at RTM, separate from all of what's going on in the budget debate. And I personally wouldn't have a problem whether we keep RTM or move to this new model, that the overall amount should be set by the budgetary process, and it should be balanced with other needs and in the town, and some of the rules for it should be more publicly discussed. But I do think that the reason we created it initially in RTM was this same idea to streamline things, that we would look at the budget as a whole, and if we reduced it, all of the allocations would go down. But there was review of the human services budget, but I remember having long discussions about an individual requester, and we spent 45 minutes discussing one, $1,000 gift, support to an agency, and we wanted to get rid of that process and give it to there. So I just wanted to clarify that historical thing. But I do think it would be better to embed the human services budget in the overall town budget discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Timothy.
Timothy Belknap, RTM 9. I just had a quick question. So you guys were appointed by the select board, and do you feel independent? It feels to me like you're making your own independent decisions and you're going to submit an independent review of where you want to go. Is that not correct? Or?
That's not entirely correct.
Okay.
We make our proposals. I would say that we are making those proposals based on input we're getting from everyone, including the select board, but we don't weigh their opinions any more or less than anyone else's. But ultimately, the only way for these to get passed are either to, right now, the only ways are to send them to RTM or to have the select board adopt them.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
So we can't act independently.
But I guess my question was regarding the finance committee, whether they'd be appointed by the select board and feel that independence. And yes, take in the opinions of others around town, but also feel independent enough to submit a report that might be contradictory to where things are going. That's kind of where I was going with that. Thank you all.
I don't. I have mixed feelings about that. I think that it's much clearer, and the finance committee would clearly be an outside group looking in if they are not appointed by the select board.
They're just, what they are is they're watchdogs, I don't want to use that word because it's kind of a buzzword, but it's
It
a
is.
group of citizens who are getting together and looking at the town budget and telling the rest of us, here's our interpretation. And I think if the select board's in the middle of that, there's no need for it. I mean, there's no need for it. And I think it can be appointed at open town meeting. The people at open town meeting can decide who they want to be, who wants to be on the finance committee. It's not that hard, I don't think, but, So let's get back on where we were, which I can't remember where we were.
Can
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand why this is a proposal to have the town meeting on the third Saturday after the first Tuesday of March.
Two reasons. One is I think having it on a weeknight or a weekday will limit participation, which is the whole point of having open town meeting was to allow more people to attend. I know towns that have an open town meeting and they do it on 2 different nights. 2 different weeknights, and they get different people coming for different things, which seems to me to be a little strange. But I don't know, I picked the third Saturday because that's what we do now. And I think having it on that Tuesday, the same day we do the Australian ballot, would be confusing.
I would advocate for either having it on that Tuesday, or if we're really insistent on doing it on a weekend, which not everyone works on Monday through Friday, so I don't know that it's really fair to say that more people will come if it's on a Saturday, to have it that first Saturday. I don't understand why we need to wait so long, because if we don't have RTM, there's no need to have this delay,
Right,
so count the votes.
Right, because we're doing the RTM schedule based on when election day is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have them anymore.
It
So
could
we
be,
could move
it
it
could
up.
be any Saturday.
Yeah, I think we
care.
Yeah.
And the other thing about having it on open time meeting days, there are protections in place that allow people to attend that meeting.
Is it just state? Like, so let's say you have you're a remote worker, so your place of employment, technically headquarters is in New York. Are you protected under Vermont law because you reside here? That would be a concern, and I think a growing concern as folks are more mobile. However, I am not against, all having it on one day. I believe schools are closed, so the ability to be there anyway, is it any more difficult to get your, fill your ballot and then just stay in person? No matter what, there's going to be friction for the first year or 2 or whatever if the proposal goes through. So it's going to be a thing. What is going to help? I think the Saturday right afterwards is totally fine, or the Tuesday of.
So if we did the open town meeting the same day as Australian ballot, how would that work? People who just wanted to come in and cast their ballot would just cast their ballot?
There have to be the logistics for that. I think we'd have to ask Hillary what she thought.
Well, I know that Marlboro does it that way, but they're very
Well,
small.
that's one thing we need to ask
They
Hillary.
do Australian ballots now completely.
Yeah, but before, they did some Australian ballot, and and then had an open town meeting. And you could come, they were there from as long as the agenda was open, and you could come and vote, and you could come and vote and leave.
I would like to believe there's a way to, like, in the current process, to just be like, here's your line to the
Right.
Right. booth and keep on going to the
meeting.
open
If you
portion.
want.
Right, or here's your exit.
Why don't I ask, like, just let me ask Hillary, like, what her thoughts would be? Since she'd be the person,
Yeah,
like,
that's a good
having
question. She'd have
to do it.
break both things.
Yeah.
And just to speak to the, maximum convenience for the maximum number, I don't disagree at all that there certainly are people who work on the weekends. That's a true thing. And I'm gonna venture, without data in front of me, this is definitely a gut observation, but the standard work week still is Monday through Friday. I mean, there are people who work the weekend, but if we're trying to increase the opportunity for people to participate in town meeting, I think switching from Saturday to a weekday is not the best way to do that. And I think it's interesting, actually, I appreciate you raising about remote workers. I think remote workers is a question. Equally, and maybe possibly affecting even more people for us in this corner of the state is people who live in Brattleboro but work in New Hampshire or Massachusetts. And there's hundreds and hundreds of those. And so I just think that it's true to our motivation to open up this process to allow more people to participate, that we would want to keep the in-person meeting held on a Saturday. That's my opinion.
I agree with Saturday as well, but I still ask Hillary, so we'll have the information. But I agree too, we don't have to wait until the end of March.
No, we don't.
We can just do it.
And I feel like it makes more sense to have everything one day. But we can talk to Hillary about that, but I that's how most towns do it. And I think it's, obviously you can vote early, you can vote absentee, you can do all of that, but at the end of the day, having to remember 2 different dates is less convenient than just saying like, yep, this is the day everything happens and that's it. And so I would advocate for whatever day we pick, that everything happens at once.
Well, that's an interesting question. Could we do
I don't know.
everything on one day but do it on Saturday? I don't know. Traditionally Australian ballots are voted on Tuesdays, but is there anything in the law that says they have to be?
Because they could still early vote. If they wanted to vote in person, it would just be on Saturday. But they could vote just like they would
Right. Yeah, I
now.
don't know.
Early voting starts a couple of weeks before,
Yeah,
so people would have plenty of time.
if they couldn't show up on a Saturday to cast a ballot. I think Saturdays are just more accessible for people to have them sit all
Yeah.
day at a meeting.
Well,
You
we're
know,
whittling
instead of
down the
few
agenda,
hours.
we're whittling down the agenda, so.
It's just a few hours.
The thing is gonna be there'll be a lot of discussion on the budget. And I remember those days when we went line by line through the human services budget.
It was a nightmare.
And yes, it was a nightmare.
So I think that so the default is the meeting is on the first Tuesday of March. And it can be adjourned to another date. If the town so votes, it can start its annual meeting in any of the 3 days immediately preceding the first Tuesday of March. But the ballot would still be on the first Tuesday. So it would basically be either you start it that Tuesday, you adjourn it to another day, or the town votes to have it the Saturday before, and the Australian ballot is still on.
So the in-person meeting has to be prior to the ballot?
No.
I misunderstood that. I thought you were saying you'd
No.
have to have the
The
Saturday
default
before.
is it's on Tuesday. you can say it's on Tuesday, but then say it's adjourned to Saturday, the following Saturday.
Uh-huh.
Or you can have a townwide vote and say, we hold the
Got it.
the Saturday before.
Yep.
And adjourn the voting until Tuesday.
But couldn't that townwide vote be the approval of charter language that says this or something like it? I mean, whatever Saturday we specify, I'm agnostic as to
Presumably, yeah.
2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 1 week later, but.
Yeah.
We could specify that the meeting is to be held on a certain Saturday.
Right, but the voting still has to be on the first Tuesday.
Got it, perfect, thank you.
Oh, wait a minute, let me make sure I understand. If we can automatically in the charter adjourn the meeting.
Well, we could just say the meeting is on Saturday.
And there are
But
communities
the
that do that.
ballot still has to be on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, okay.
We found when we did the research of the other towns, there are towns that do that. Have a in-person meeting on a Saturday and a balloting on town meeting day. Some of them do the in-person meeting actually months later, or like many weeks later, like first week of May kind of thing. First Saturday in May.
That's cutting it awful close for the budget.
Well, you're assuming
isn't
you're
it?
gonna get a budget approved, but I'm just saying, I'm not proposing that, I'm saying that there are a variety of different ways in which other communities have addressed that within their charter.
But we know we don't have to wait till the third Saturday, so if we're gonna go Saturday, I think we all wanna go sooner rather
First
than
Saturday.
first Saturday after the
And just
first
to,
Tuesday.
not to add to the confusion, but as we discussed before with the flow chart, there is a possibility that we will have this default language in place for that first year.
Yes.
And the town could then vote to move it to Saturday, but there's no guarantee that would happen.
Actually, I think there's a likelihood that we're gonna be on the default language for the first
Oh, I
year.
think so too.
Yeah.
We're not
So-
gonna get it approved by the legislature and the governor
so
before
that
that.
first year, it's probably gonna have to be on a Tuesday.
Got it,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Unless there was a majority vote to adjourn it to Saturday, which
Yeah.
No, it's
I'm
going
sure
to.
Hillary would love that, but.
Yeah, actually, so that's interesting and could lead us, if we do, if this plays out in such a way that there's a vote in November to defeat, eliminate representative town meeting and create a new charter, and that new charter calls for a meeting on an open meeting on a Saturday, but it doesn't get approved in time for 2026, which it probably wouldn't. If we have a very positive experience with a Tuesday open meeting, we could ask the legislature
Right,
to modify that little piece in their approval. They're probably gonna mess with what we send up to them in
Right.
one way or
right,
another.
right.
So we could actually ask them to adjust that if we changed our minds about it as a community and wanted to have a Tuesday. So,
Yeah, 'cause if it gets if RTM goes away, we'll have our test case in March of
Yep.
2026.
Okay.
So we'll know.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were talking about the back page, and we just went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and basically figured out reasons why none of that stuff would have to go on a consent
Right.
agenda,
or an agenda at all.
or an agenda at all, at any kind of town meeting, or
Yeah.
annual,
I did look at the audit does need to be warned and provided to the town, but there's nothing saying they need to vote on it.
So as long as it's in the annual town report, the way it always has been, that would make it distributed
Yeah.
to the public, but the acceptance of it could be done by the select board.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has to accept or reject it, it just is what it is.
Yeah. Even in places that don't have a town meeting at all, there's usually a form.
They have to generate a report, but I don't think anyone has to
But that's
like.
the auditors generating the report, so
Yeah.
then the governing body usually would be the ones would accept that as the
It's town record.
accountant's report of how the finances went for that year. Somebody should, so it's not just a private document floating.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, it has to be warned and provided, but I don't think anyone then has to say like, yep, that's cool. But like, there's no, like, no one has to approve it. It just has to be presented.
Not approved, for sure, it's acceptance.
It, there was one instance in which I believe the finance committee had a question about the auditor's report, which was raised at RTM. Or was it? It was raised in the report.
And I think recently somebody got up at the info meeting and said, why are we approving this town auditor's report? And there was an answer, and I can't remember what the heck the answer was. But
You're right.
yeah, it wasn't,
In any event, it doesn't have to be an action at town
no,
meeting,
so we can do
is
that.
what
Yeah.
you've advised, correct? Hannah?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find the language.
Okay.
Perfect. And then, the other things, B, C, D, and E are other things that, not for consent agenda. But if we're describing what the open town meeting is gonna do, that's again.
Well, B depends upon what we decide to recommend about the Human Services Committee.
Right.
And so that leaves C, D, and E, which I think. And then I didn't put on here, but the, what do they call those things when people make resolutions at the end of the non-binding,
Yeah,
Any other matters or whatever.
non-binding resolutions?
Other
It's broader than just non-binding resolutions, though. I think it's any other matters.
Yeah.
But we should capture the select board compensation item from page 1 and bring it over to page 2.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm going through the.
I don't want to be a stickler, but the default is everything is open unless it's Australian, so I don't know that we need to list it.
Well, that's what I was.
So I have a question about that. Because of the environment in which we've been making our decisions, we know that there has been some degree of concern around heading in the direction that we're heading, right? And I totally respect that. I also want to be careful if we agree as a group of, for instance, on the very specific question that I think we have agreed upon, that the budget ought to be dealt with by the open town meeting. If we do indeed recommend that as a charter commission, then I'd like to make sure that it actually gets implemented that way. So I want to be careful about relying on statutory language that says it is unless it isn't. To be really clear that piece of business and the other related financial items, we've named 3 actually here that I think are useful to say out loud or say in print, that the adoption of the annual budget, the use of unassigned fund balance, and the setting of the select board's compensation would be actions taken in an open town meeting. Personally, I think it's important that happened that way. And so I worry a little bit about relying on language that implies it will happen that way rather than making it clear.
I think so too. And I think in some ways we have to remember, and again, we're trying to get the document short, but we're also trying to get a document that makes it clear to everybody how things happen. So there's not, well, that's not what I heard at that meeting. You know what I mean? I just think it needs to be as clear as humanly
Explicit.
possible. Yeah,
As explicit
Yeah.
as we could make it.
yeah.
And it
So
will
that-
be different and new for folks,
Yeah.
so I think listing out some things, I can't imagine it would be too terribly long, and I have to believe we'll be cutting 3 pages out of the
Yes.
charter anyway with
Yeah.
cleanup.
Yeah.
That having a handful of lines to empower
Yes.
would be helpful for folks.
Yeah. And I think we've been trying in, with the select board section and with the town manager section to make it really clear, like what the roles are. So I think it needs to be equally clear when we get to this section, what it all means.
And I don't think it'll be
What the-
much.
I don't think so
There was a
either.
time when it seemed like it, just based on all the conversations we've had over the many months,
Yeah.
it felt like it was gonna be a whole list of things. I mean, we kind of headed in that direction, and thank you for that, in terms of just drafting up, like, see what the spaghetti sticks to the wall.
Yeah.
So it, we could have ended up in a place where there were like 6 or 8 things on this list and 6 or 8 or 10 things over on this list, and we're not, which I think is good and useful. But there's a few very important things I think it would be good for us to know.
Yeah. And right now, we do have we have 4 that were, the unassigned fund balance, the budget, 3 right now. The unassigned fund balance, the budget, and the select board compensation, and then what happens with the human services committee is up in the air. So there are really only 3 things that we definitely know we want to put on the list.
I hate to be this person, but there is a statute that says you have to vote on the budget at town meeting. And it lays out.
I thought when you said, and maybe part of this is just
Yeah.
only hearing it tonight to address this particular question, maybe it would be useful to look at sections of it before we come to conclusion on it. But when you read it earlier tonight, you read that, not the part about the budget, but you read about like the business that gets conducted at open town meeting. That's the default. It's not called open, but at an annual town meeting. But then there was language about, unless it's placed on an Australian ballot, and it's that unless language that makes me anxious if we don't specify in the charter that these particular things that are not easily made into yes or no questions, and or some of us believe at least ought not to be made into yes or no questions, but should be debated and then should have the opportunity for amendment and then should be agreed upon in the meeting. So maybe it's a matter, again, of, like I said earlier in the meeting, I'm not familiar enough with the statute. I've always operated in Vermont, I've always operated under the town's charter. So I have not familiarized myself with what you're looking at to understand what is the protection of something that is, where the standard is it's considered an open, but there's a mechanism to kick it over to Australia. That's the concern I have.
That has to be done by an affirmative vote. You can't just decide to kick something over.
Affirmative vote by who?
The voters of the town.
Well, let me ask you a question, and I'm interrupting Peter, but
Please.
it's
No, I'm done. Thanks.
it's on my, the select board is the ones, can say, we're gonna put something on the ballot. Like, they put all this stuff on the ballot this last year. What is to stop them, unless it's in the charter, for them to put the budget on the ballot? That's what I think we wanna make sure, at least, I shouldn't say we, I would like to be assured that the budget, our town budget, is talked about during what we're right now calling the open town meeting.
Or annual town.
Yeah,
There you go.
but whatever, you know what I mean, so that it's really, really clear, and there can't be some end run. You know what I mean, there can't be another mechanism where someone's gonna say, well, no, that's not gonna be how it happened, because in the charter it doesn't say that. It says, unless otherwise determined by somebody.
What it says is, unless specifically required by statute, the provisions of the Australian ballot system shall not apply to the annual or special town meeting unless that municipality at an annual or special town meeting votes to do that. So you can't put anything on Australian ballot
Unless
it's
in the
explicitly
in-person meeting,
voted on.
it's decided to
Yeah.
put it on.
Yeah, I still don't feel comfortable
No.
with that.
And-
I'm sorry, I know we're trying
Tell them
to not,
complicate these, but can I also
and
say,
not duplicate what's in statute, but I also wanna make it explicit so that people in the town understand what it is we're gonna have them vote on, at which venue.
and I think it's important too, based on the conversations that we're having now, within our whole community. And I think if we go and we present a charter and we go to the select board and they're gonna say, well, what's happening with the budget, and then we have to explain it, it means nobody understands what we've done. Yeah, I mean, I think in a big question like that, if we have to have we have to explain it to somebody because it's not there, then I don't think we've done our job on something that's big. I agree with, we don't need all these little things, but I think if it's something as important as how is our town budget
The
decided,
financial parts.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just feel like if we don't name them, we're just creating confusion. just based on everything that we've been hearing lately. I just wanted, I wanted to say my words of wisdom before we get David to say his.
Mr. Levenbach.
Thank you, David Lovelock, District 9. I just want to make sure that what Maya said a moment ago doesn't get ignored. There is the Kurt Dames other matters that needs to be listed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David.
Good night.
Was somebody else?
Hannah, I'm totally with you on not naming 5,000 things, but I think there are just a couple of things that if we don't name them, people are going to be left unclear.
Right, I don't even think it says in here that they vote on the budget.
It says
No.
RTM does.
No, it doesn't. Peter and I actually added it under the new stuff that we did. Remember we were talking about the select board proposals.
There was, we did put in the proposed language at the end about the budget
Yeah,
process,
we added.
the financial matters section.
Yeah, we added that because we noticed it wasn't there.
Right.
But I really think based on.
And maybe that's, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead, because you could. about to say
Maybe that's sufficient, actually, instead of this. I don't know. This is where some of it comes down to, let's decide the substance,
Yeah.
and then we can figure out
Yeah.
the form. Because maybe addressing it in that financial section
something, because we don't-
might be sufficient, and then we could rely on statute
Right.
for the annual town meeting piece.
Right. That's actually a really good point.
I think if I could venture to try to help us keep making progress, in various ways, some of us strongly, some of us gently, I think 4 of us have spoken on this question of that explicitly naming the financial matters is good and helpful. And it sounds to me kind of like you didn't think that was useful because it's extra words, but I want to be careful not to put words in your mouth. And we haven't heard from Denise. So, but if we could land in a place on that, then that's a thing that we've decided, is that we want those financial matters to be decided in the meeting with the people present. And we can figure out later how it lands in the text.
Yeah, my concern is that if you put it in here and the statute changes, then you have these discrepancies. And I'm not saying that in the statute it hasn't been changed in a really long time, but it could be. And in the interest of making this evergreen and not creating these inconsistencies between these 2 authorities that are delegating this power to the town, it's just like saying like, oh, well, we're gonna meet at 10 a.m. I want to make sure it's gonna be light out. It's like, of course it's gonna be light out. It's daytime. Like, it's like you don't need to like state the obvious. I guess is my point.
Yeah.
And I've always said that this is not a how-to manual. This is a foundational document.
Totally.
And so if you don't need to, if it doesn't need to be said, you don't need to say it. I guess is my perspective. But
I will admit to being so in the weeds in this and trying to be so try to get it right, and I everyone thinks differently about this, and so to be reminded that these items have not been explicitly listed in the charter. I am very pro to move towards and see a version of not having the language of mirroring and cleaning up what we have, relying on state statutes. So not naming the things because they already happen, folks generally know it, and it's expected because it's statute. So I am very pro, I don't know what the in-between step is. I'm not sure that we're actually ready to see the side by side, but I think in an information meeting to the town on why we're presenting potentially presenting the language, they will see it's not listed, oh, I have a question, where's the budget? That's okay, because it's not listed in state statute and this is what we stand on. So that is where I am leaning.
Denise.
Thanks for that, Hannah, because that's the question that was coming up for me is if we put it in here, how is that gonna bite us later? So that makes a lot of sense to me, obviously, keeping it cleaner.
And that can cut both ways. I mean, maybe we want it to be this way regardless of what happens at the state
That's-
level.
Right.
But
Well, that,
I would think that you know, like Brattleboro has this like need to be different sometimes when it doesn't have to be.
The reason I would argue for putting it in the charter is because having the budget voted on by open town meeting is probably gonna be the second most controversial thing that we're gonna propose. Now, the first being letting the town decide whether we wanna do away with RTM. And the second one, because we keep hearing from people, we wanna vote on the budget on Australian ballot. But they wanna have an opportunity to talk about it and amend it and change it and whatever. And the two things are contradictory. I think that's where we've landed, that we want the budget voted on in annual town meeting. I have to get used to saying that, annual town. And I think unless it's in the charter and listed specifically, I think it's gonna create a lot more hassle for us in terms of trying to explain the way Joyce said.
I know you're going to.
Well, I really appreciate this conversation because I actually find compelling this thing that you articulated and you agreed with about being able to like show it on a piece of paper and tell it in a meeting and like that should be sufficient if we can inform the community about what they're going to be voting on. I agree with that. I accept that fully. It's what you said after that, Anna, about unless we actually want to, because it cuts both ways. That's actually the reason why I'm feeling differently about this one. I mean, I think as we've gone along through our work, I shared the idea enthusiastically that we ought to trim this down to just what it needs to be. I feel like it needs to include these financial matters explicitly as being actions taken in the in-person meeting, because I think it's important, not for Brattleboro just to be different, but because I think those pieces of business ought to get done that way. If the state ever were to change that statute, I would want us to continue to get our budget done that way. And so I would want us to outlive the change in the statute.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a compelling reason, but saying like, oh, let's do it so it's convenient is not.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That's why I think it's important that it got named.
Yeah.
That like it is already adequately covered in statute, but it may not stay adequately covered in statute. And so I think we ought to make it explicit.
And Joy, you had me when you said, because I was like, oh my God, that's me too. You know, we're so into the weeds of it that we sometimes like begin to obsess about something. I'm like, you're right, we're obsessing about it. But then when Hannah said what Peter just said, you know, the state statute changes. So I believe now my getting too into the weeds thing, which what it was, is now really making sure it always stays this way until another charter commission comes around and decides that they don't want it to happen this way anymore. That's what I think is the compelling reason. Because at first I was too into the weeds, going, oh, we have to define everything, blah, blah. But now.
That's why this was a giant list of
Yes.
things, because it was in the weeds.
Yeah,
Everyone,
exactly.
what did we capture? Everything everyone said.
That's right.
Did we name it so everyone knows that we tried? And I'm sure we still missed something.
And that's why, to me, if we are gonna name something, it is for the reason that Hannah just said, it's because we don't want it to change if state statute changes. Like, to me, if state statute changed and said the town clerk has to do something else, that would not, like,
We should do whatever it wants to.
right.
Yeah.
But on this one, I do think it's important to put it in for that reason, that if it, I don't think, this is too big a thing to sort of just, whatever the state says, we'll do it, even though it's.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good point though, Hannah, you may not, everything we can look at it that way. For, you know, and I think that's the lens to look through a lot of these things through. Are we just putting it in because we're getting too into the weeds, or are we putting it in because we wanna make sure it sticks? Yeah.
Where do we go from
Where do we go from here? So do we wanna just name that we still have to just figure that one out? Or do we wanna hash it out
I think
right
that it all kind of ties in with this Human Services and Finance Committee. I think that there's been some really compelling arguments made that we maybe need to not sort of have Human Services pulled out in this way, and it should just be part of the budget, and that committee can be appointed by the select board and can do their work, and you know, there's maybe other ways that can happen, and maybe we should invite them to come in and discuss the logistics of that, and discuss how the finance committee report gets generated and that kind of stuff, and that all sort of plays into this discussion of how the budget is handled at the town meeting.
Can we schedule each of those two committees
Yeah.
to come before us as soon as possible?
Yeah, I'll get in touch with them, and I do think, I mean, to me.
David's still on.
Yeah, like for him to have an opportunity to confer with his
That's what I'm saying.
colleagues.
And I think the human services one is gonna be more controversial. Because there are people on both sides that feel very strongly about that. So, that's gonna be one that I think, I always hate to use the word controversial, but I think there'll be people that have opinions on that in both ways, so
Yeah.
I'll get.
But just for process, in terms of a sound process, it feels like these new questions have arisen.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We haven't given them prior consideration. So having each of the two bodies have an opportunity to talk among themselves and then come bring whatever advice they may have to offer us.
We have to do.
That feels useful.
Oh, it's totally useful. I agree. That's why I'm saying I don't think we can make the decision without talking to, or knowing. I'm with you.
Good.
Yeah. I'm the same page. Okay. So what we'll do on that one is we'll get Human Services and Finance, tell them, I can email and contact, well, David's on, tell them what we're grappling with in the new situation. Then we can come back to what language we put in about the budget and stuff in the charter. Does that make sense on the whole finance piece?
Yes.
Okay.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In terms of Australian ballot, if we look at Article 2, Section 2,
Article 2, Section 2.
then I think do we need to list these things? We don't, they're in statute, right? That bonds have to be voted on by Australian ballot, and charter amendments have to be voted on by charter.
Not
don't have
necessarily.
And they're in their own little separate section of how you make charter changes.
Okay, so,
So that's
but we can take, and so the only change that we need to make to this section 2 is to take away representative town meeting.
No.
That's not the decision. Yeah, we have to decide if we want everything listed
Yeah.
or nothing listed, I think is actually.
No, but
it
we
doesn't,
have to vote on these offices.
it doesn't need listed because there's a longer list.
So the issue is that this is 17 VSA 2646, which lays out who the elected officers are in the town, and it actually, again, defaults to having them voted on at the meeting. But we have said that these get voted on by Australian ballot, and that's why it either needs to be a complete list or or just a reference to statute.
But these are specifically elected officers of the town, correct?
Yes, it's
So
elected.
a simple phrase that says on the first Tuesday in March, the voters and youth voters of the town shall elect
The officers.
by Australian ballot all elected officers of the town.
As defined in
As defined there, but also as set forth separately in some other locations within the charter. I'm happy to defer to the particular you getting the particular language right legally, but there should be some reference to what goes on elsewhere in the charter, for instance, because not all the select board members get elected that day. 3 of them are up each time on that day.
Well, that's what
Because that's
how it's set
specified
up.
separately elsewhere in the charter, but not in the statutes.
Oh, our timing is different than
Yes.
others.
Yes.
Right, yeah, I mean, the town officers are separate. Well, I mean, this actually does, yeah, I mean, ours is a little different there, but, this also includes this actually also includes an advisory budget committee, but, I don't want to go there, but.
Is that like an if
But we
you
should
have one
look
or are
at
you
that
supposed to have
list and we should decide, because this includes the moderator, the town clerk unless they're appointed, which we need to probably.
Oh, yeah, the moderator is on the ballot.
Right, because right now they're voted on at RTM and, yeah, I mean, it's not even in this
Moderators.
list.
The
but-
moderator
Moderator.
is voted on
Yeah.
Australian ballot.
Yeah, so they're not even on this list and they should be.
Right.
This either needs to be a complete list or a reference to something else.
Actually, the moderator is on here under E, but yeah.
So I can share this statute around and we can look at it and decide how we want to handle it. But
Please do that. Yeah.
This needs to be either more or less comprehensive.
Especially if there are some offices named there that we don't have, then we might want to actually name ours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The
You sharing that
justices
would be great.
and the justices of the peace aren't on this list either.
We're not on, are we on the March ballot or on the November?
Don't know.
I think you're on March.
You're gonna talk to Hillary.
No, I'm a justice of the peace, I'm like, where the heck is my name on the ballot?
Don't know.
I think I remember it voting in March because voted for RTM members and justices. But I might be totally wrong.
Okay, so we still need to decide that, we're gonna get the list.
So
Justices of the peace are elected in November, and that's
Yeah.
actually the Constitution.
Okay.
So,
Talk about the underlying document.
An elected official in the Constitution.
sorry, I'm just confused.
I am too, I don't even remember mine. Okay.
I know I voted
Yeah, it's
for
freezing
them.
me out here. Now we're freezing.
Second.
Okay, so let me just go, we're gonna decide about what to do with the elected officer thing after we look at the list.
But I think we all agree we want to keep that on Australian ballot. 'Cause that is a
Definitely,
yes or no
definitely,
vote.
yes.
Definitely.
And so we need to, make sure that this is the list we want and we don't want to add or.
That's
Right, and we're not gonna add any of these things that I,
Right.
Put
right.
on
We
my
just
list.
want to get the list right. Good.
that's fine.
That's a good place to land.
Okay.
But we will eliminate A.
Yeah, I think this still needs some restructuring in general,
Yes.
but yeah, the A is gone regardless of
Yes.
how it is restructured.
Well, and also depending on where we land on human services and Human Services, the Human Services Process and Human Services Committee.
Yeah.
That could end up being on this list and wouldn't be in statute
Right.
too. So we'll just see. We'll see where we land. That'll help us.
Yeah, and so, but that'll either go here or it'll go with the rest of the committees.
Exactly.
So.
That's right.
What is, going back to section 1, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what I need to retype for the guys to look at. What is, do we agree we don't know what general town meeting is?
Yeah. Can I'd like to make a suggestion that hopefully is helpful to you, Maya, and not insulting. I'm really hoping this doesn't feel insulting. I think what you two did was important to launch the conversation we've had tonight. And I think as we go forward, we ought to defer to Hannah to take the product of our decision making and turn it into charter language.
I think we're at a point where we need to just start having a master draft.
Right.
Yes.
That's fine, that's the word.
That's fine, yes to that. And my point being that next step on this body of work, I think should be Hannah's rather than any of the rest of
Oh,
us.
that's fine with me.
Thank you.
As long, I mean, I'm happy not to do any more work on this. I mean,
Good.
I just,
Though I think a discrete answer to your question is that I think Article 2, Section 1A is a holdover to be differentiated against B, representative town meeting. I would say that those only make sense against each other. And so definitions likely will not matter for our future draft. And I think the whole thing will likely,
except for youth voter.
that might be in another section.
No,
No.
that's why this needs to be reworked, because if that's the only definition, that's,
Yeah.
this whole thing just maybe needs, there's good stuff in here that needs to stay in here, but I think that we can restructure this article.
Okay.
But I just did a find-in document on our charter to see if this general town meeting phrase is used anywhere else. And there's 6 references, 2 of which are in that first section.
Okay.
The remaining ones are on page 5, section 2C4. If the date of the annual general town meeting falls within 60 days after a select board hearing. This is on zoning bylaws. I think, again, that can just say annual.
Well, the thing is, and Hannah, you're way smarter than I am on this. There actually, in the select board always talks about this. There are 2 things that are considered town meetings in Brattleboro. You know what I mean? Like the warning for the town meeting is the vote on X day, and the warning for the town meeting is the, right now, representative town meeting. So that's why I'm sort of like, if we say it's the annual town meeting, technically, right now, we have 2 it's called, March 4th is called town meeting day.
There are places that have an open town meeting and an Australian ballot that handle that. I don't know the
Well,
exact
that's what I'm saying.
terminology they use, but we're not the only place that has the 2 things.
No, that's what I'm saying, we gotta just make it.
Yeah, and so I think I've seen it. I'm not 100% sure of this, but in the research that we've done around some of these topics, I think I've seen it both ways. In one case where there was like a warning and another warning, and then more often I think a warning where there's like these things to be voted by ballot on such and such a day, full stop.
Yeah.
These things to be discussed and voted on such and such a day at such and such a place.
That's what that's what I'm saying, it's like, we just have to make it clear. Or look at these, because the general town meeting under petition is not that, in our current definition, the general town meeting is the March 4th ballot day.
That's
It's
correct.
not the
Right.
representative town meeting.
Right.
So it's just something that we like.
Yep.
So I think we need to just define whether that is something that gets voted on by ballot or voted on by.
Yes, yes.
But of the 6, 2 of them are in this first section of the definitions. 2 of them are on page 4, section 2A2 regarding initiatives, and section 2C4, and then the other 2 are in the school board section, which is getting mixed anyway. So those are the only places where we need to.
Okay.
That definition I don't think will be relevant.
Great.
Anymore. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, and we just talked about elected officers section.
Yep.
And then we went back and forth. The next one was Article 2, Section 3B, and that was the one that you folks had drafted something, but we just dealt with that.
Yeah,
We just
Yeah.
did away with that.
We did that.
We're gonna delete it and delete the new language. We're gonna delete everything.
Article 2, Section 3B is all
And
deleted.
3E goes away as recommended.
No, 3E has to do with write-in candidates for any office. 3E.
Yeah, I think that
We need to take out, we can take out Human Services Committee, which I put in.
I think
And-
C through E all need to go in the same section with this new Australian ballot. Like, because it says
And
all other officers
taking
are
out a bunch
elected
of
by
stuff
Australian
because of the
ballot.
references
Yeah.
to RTM. Yeah.
But that all
Good.
C through E there all can be
Perfect.
reworked into that new
And we're
section.
gonna take out,
So we just
Yeah.
defer to your drafting,
So C,
and then
D,
we see what is in front of us once there's something in front of us.
so Section 3, C, D, and E are gonna be reworked somehow. Or eliminated and reworked. That's what I'm keeping track of. So
section what? Which?
we're at page 2, Section 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
C,
it's
D,
just
and E.
all of these, because they all talk about
Yeah.
electing officers.
Yeah.
Reworked, okay. So Section 2, Section C is all right. 7D, is that part of that too? Page 4, what is the next thing?
Wait. So 7D, I guess my question is that the Board of Library Trustees is,
Yeah, we never talked about
Why
it.
wouldn't it just be at an open town meeting? Why wouldn't they just be elected at open town meeting?
That's,
they can be,
They
is
can
that they're not, because right now it says they're
elected at
elected, but they're nominated by the select board, like, is that?
No, they're only, the select board fills the vacancy.
Yeah, that's right, until the next representative time.
What happens is the board of trustees, what happens, it says, and nominated by the select board, and by, no,
No,
That's,
look
that's
on page,
until the next town meeting.
look on
Right.
page 3,
Yes,
B,
B,
3B.
yes.
7B.
But
You know,
that does say
it's
nominated by the select board, which isn't how it happens.
no, because what's happening now is it's always comes from the board of directors of a library.
Uh-huh.
And I think we heard at RTM this time that somebody wanted to be elected from the floor, and they were like, actually, we already have our
Right,
slates.
that's
You know,
right.
so like, it should reflect the way it happens, and
Yeah.
and it, in
Yeah,
either
it's-
instance, it doesn't match.
And from the floor.
Yeah.
Nominated by the select
Well-
board, by the trustees, and from the floor.
The funny thing is, the person that wanted to be nominated from the floor actually just got appointed because somebody left. Why don't I do this? Oh, but it's incorporated under 22 VSA. I was wondering, is there some kind of rule that makes it so we have to do it this way?
I mean, I can look, but 22 VSA is just about how you create a library.
Yeah. Why don't I just check and see, because there's no reason that open town meeting can't be the ones that elect it.
I mean, but do they, again, it's like they need to be elected, but like if they're being nominated, can it just be appointed by the
Yeah,
select
there's
board?
gotta be a
There is a
There's
reason, I'm not suggesting that the reason hasn't outlived its usefulness.
I'll find
I think
that.
there's something to reflect on there. I don't have an opinion on it yet. But the reason is because of the relative independence.
Right.
You have 22 VSA in front of you, I don't. But there's a lot of places in town, or a lot of places in the state that actually have a library that's created under state statute that isn't a department of the town.
Yeah.
In Brattleboro, it's this hybrid, and so there's kind of a mishmash of, it comes up at different times. Some of the financial aspects of the library also come up this way. There's an endowment at the library that is managed by the trustees, even though there's also taxpayer funding each year for the library. So
This whole thing probably needs to get cleaned up somehow. But
That's why we
it
just
can't
said,
just travel under statute
Yeah.
because
Right.
it's a
yeah,
odd bird.
that's why we said, decision on how library trustees are elected.
You know what?
We need a decision.
Yeah, one of the
And,
things.
and that's back to the question was, why are they elected? So that it's because of this semi-independence
Yeah.
that library trustees have been elected rather than just appointed as a committee of the town.
So we,
so are they not nominated by the select board at all?
No,
No,
not
select board.
traditionally.
No.
So then
board
maybe
doesn't
that
have
needs to
anything
get
to do with them.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And this is one of the things, remember Maya, this was a big deal in the 1980s,
Yes.
and people wanted to change it. And there's also the structure to, well, as Peter was talking about, there's things that are sort of embedded in how the library was set up.
The
Yeah, it was
trustees
set up.
actually have some independent authority
We do.
to run the library
Yes.
in a way that, for instance, the recreation board doesn't
No,
at
that's
the
right.
recreation department.
Because the library trustees hire the librarian, I believe.
No,
Sort of.
jointly with the town
Yeah.
manager.
But we have, there's a role.
Oh, there is definitely a role.
Yeah.
No, it was yes, it is a process that involves the trustees and the town manager,
Yeah.
and they have to agree in order to make the
Yeah.
appointment. And,
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
different.
when Kate and I were looking at the other charter commission stuff, there was some big controversy about changing the way library trustees were elected.
And I'll talk to Stern, see if she has any paperwork on what
There
the
may
rules
even
are.
be, I don't know if this is true or not, but because the Brooks Library wasn't always a town library, it became a town library, there may even be some things in the history of that and the documentation related to the creation of the library
Yeah.
and then to the bringing of the library into town government that actually ties our hands on this. There may be some legal requirements
Yeah.
that are reflected here.
Because it was a big discussion, remember, Kate, when we were looking through the minutes of,
Yeah,
and then they dropped it.
yeah. I'll see what I can find out.
Okay.
And, on that, because we do have our own.
I think it might likely be both a star question and a town attorney
I think
office
so
question.
too.
Yeah, I mean, if this isn't the way it's done, we should just make it match.
Yeah, agreed.
And we can just say, we just take out representative.
I don't think
Just
anybody
say
thinks it's
annual
broken.
town meeting.
Oh, no.
We've heard a lot, and we haven't heard anybody who thinks this process is
No.
broken.
No,
That's why, to me, if we can do it, we just say annual town meeting,
Sure, agreed.
and not like overthink it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
we have to figure out what we're calling, what our official titles are for.
Well, we're calling it annual
Us.
town meeting, and then we're just gonna be clear about this
That's the
listing.
split.
Yeah, and because I mean, even if we split up in a different day, but it's still the annual town meeting, and so some things get voted on by ballot and some things
Right.
get voted on by.
There may need to be some language that speaks to like in person or something
Yeah,
related to just those items we've talked about, but we're not there yet.
okay, so, library will be easy when we figure that out. And we had a conversation about, I'm sorry, David.
David
hearing you.
Lovenbach, and David Lovenbach. Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
David Lovenbach, and I will have a point of personal privilege later on. But just the annual town meeting, does that imply that you can't have special town meetings?
No.
No.
Okay, just it just bothered me. Okay,
Don't worry, we're not gonna get rid of it.
okay, thanks.
Welcome. Now, consolidation of services, which is on page 4, section 8. We were talking about that for other reasons, which at this particular moment, I think we were trying to figure out whether it was necessary.
Well, yeah, we were looking at it under select board powers and duties,
Yeah.
and we did discuss it. I'm sorry, I don't remember where we landed. Our recommendation that you and I brought forward was to simply delete it
Yeah,
because it is already something that occurs on a small scale, like sharing public works equipment. That happens at staff level without town meeting action.
right.
And there's plenty of contracts between communities that are approved by the select board without town meeting action.
Yeah.
But then I think the nuance was that things like joining a regional body, like the regional solid waste district or the regional communications union district, those things have required. Although actually the CUD maybe not. The CUD might have been done by select board even. So our recommendation was take this out. It's it doesn't need to be done by town meeting. It's something that's done as in the course of business, depending on the particular piece of business, either by the select board or by the staff.
So we have to figure that out. That's a deeper,
I think it's a clear one unless there's a legal reason why we need to keep it.
I think that was the question. We were trying to figure out if there's a
That might
reason
be.
to keep it.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Sorry, I don't have those notes in front of me
I
from last time.
do hear my book. So that was one of the ones I think that we had tagged.
Something I had meant to do after last time while you're looking, Kate, this is like way out of order. But I had meant, because we landed in a place last time where I think most of the homework to do, but Hannah had a couple of things, I think you did, Kate, I think that, there was some sharing of like who was gonna follow up on things. I had intended to do an email to say, do you remember it like I remember it, and here's the list? And I never got around to doing that. I'm happy to do that sometime within the next 4 or 5 days if that would be useful. And then y'all can react to it by saying, that wasn't gonna be mine, or whatever, but that, because there was a lot to follow up on from last time. I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And now you have the minutes to
To
make
remind
sure
you.
match, right?
I'm sorry?
The minutes.
Yes, and
To-
we'll make
to
sure that the
reflect it.
minutes match up.
Yeah.
And one last thing on that, those logistics. I'm gonna send that to everybody so that those who aren't involved in the follow-up know how the follow-up is occurring, because I believe that is exempt under public records, or public meeting, I should say. It's exempt under the public meetings law based on it being the organization of our work rather than being the work itself.
Okay, can we just look through these here? Page, if anyone wants to comment, I'm not saying you can't comment, but this is page 4, which is Article 2, Section 10. It really is, I think, just taking out
RTM.
RTM.
Yeah.
That seems like a simple one.
Yeah.
That seems simple. That's simple. Then we go still on page 4, Article 3. Section 1B is one to be
whole-
figured out. Yeah.
Yeah, whole section, whole Article 3
Yeah, powers of
is
the people.
powers of the people.
Yeah.
And
We need to.
there are
go
lots
through
of references to RTM scattered through them, and
it. And
that just needs to be, the whole thing just needs to be redone.
And there's some things we've already made changes on, decided,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the recall and things like that. And we had, Pete.
I'm not interrupting you again.
Oh, that's okay, go right ahead.
Isn't it in most cases in this section as simple as just striking representative? Or am I oversimplifying?
Well, with that B, if it's not delegated to the voters or the select board or the commissions or the committees, there is no other body that needs to be reserving that power.
Right.
So I think you could just strike that entire thing.
Well, the question was, how much of this powers of the people are we leaving, and how much are we I mean,
What-
if it's all gonna stay,
Yeah,
then it's just a question of removing the reference to RTM and, but they're duties that RTM has, that who's gonna take them over?
Why wouldn't regular town?
yeah,
like
that's
new
my
and new
question.
town meeting
Yeah.
do it?
Why
That's
don't we just
what I'm
strike
saying.
representative?
So they need to be rewritten and make sure that when we do change it, it's really what we wanna say.
I mean, I think we could just put that in sort of an omnibus thing like we have with the school board and then school board it's a little bit easier because it just doesn't exist anymore on the town level, but we could then look at it and say, you know, like, strike this one, I think it would be easier to actually look at what the language says, and so that would be pretty easy to draft up.
Right,
And we also have to take out school directors, cause
Sure.
school directors is all over.
I agree with all that.
housing.
I just think that most of it, you might bump into something that's more complicated and come back to us and want to talk about it, but I think most of it is going to be just striking the word representative. So this is a good example of a section, I think, where I'm not suggesting there isn't work to be done. I think the work to be done is in that drafting of that master document, so that then you bring it back and we look at it and say, yeah, that looks fine, or not.
For now, we're just gonna take out representative and everything in Article 3. That's, then we go down Article 4, Section 2, which is on page 6.
We've decided that that's something we think that the in-person discussion meeting portion of the annual meeting should address.
So that's just taking the word out as well, unless we're gonna move it to somewhere else.
I feel like it should be moved because it's not a power of the select
Select
board, it's a
board.
power.
Totally
of-
agree.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that,
Yeah.
and I think it becomes part of the thing that we aren't gonna try to finish tonight because we've got a couple of decisions yet to make, and you need to do checking on a couple of things. But we're gonna land in a place where we wanna add a list.
Yeah, I think
In
this
the right
goes into
place.
that reworked list of finance.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay, page 7, Article 4, Section 5F.
I'm sorry. Just to flag one thing, I don't think we need to make a decision about this now, but just when you're considering structure, in addition to words, the reason why it might actually belong staying here, this compensation item, is we're in the overall update of this section, we're recommending getting rid of powers and responsibilities of, because of the fact that there are some individual sections that speak to things that aren't powers or duties, but are important to name as part of the structure of the select board.
So an updated title that just says select board.
So the title is just gonna say select board, and the title is just gonna say town manager on the next section, or next article rather.
Yeah.
And so because of that, or that happened, or we're recommending that happened because there are some sections that need to be in there that don't speak to powers and
Too
duties.
many copies of that.
So we should see it in
Yeah,
its context and see if we would.
I still think it be more
might.
appropriate the other section, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that you'll decide that when you get working on the whole.
Okay. And now we go to page 7, Section 4, Article 4, Section 5, F, 9, and 10.
That's just the
Clerk and the
town
treasurer.
clerk and the treasurer being ratified by
And it
RTM, and we took
likely
that
falls
out.
underneath a previous conversation
It
we
does.
had of removing
Yes.
lists that are incomplete and
Yeah,
exactly
not,
It does.
that
Yeah.
act,
Exactly.
Yeah.
not active.
Okay. Article 5G, which is on page 10.
And so that's G and I, just, and I
Yeah.
believe those are,
It's G and I.
just updating, the
Yes.
language, a straight update.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yep.
Article, page 12, which is Article 7, Section 3A. Section 3A. Oh, and this is the Section 2.
This is finance.
And 4A. Yeah, I think that's just a word change, but we had also, Peter, there's some more changes to that section,
I believe so, yeah.
but those are just word changes as well for representative town meeting.
The revenue section?
Yeah.
We're on the revenue section.
And this is where we're actually recommending a couple of additional sections,
Yeah.
new sections to be dropped in to speak specifically to the budget process.
But in any case, whatever we do, it's not gonna say representative town meeting.
That's correct.
No, that's why I suggested
Yeah.
we have,
Yeah.
replace it with open town meeting or
Yeah.
however we want
Yeah.
to
That's right.
call it, annual town meeting.
That's right.
And then page 13, Article 8. That is the charter.
And it's got RTM and special RTM and all that and stuff in it. So it needs to be rewritten.
It's likely okay just to be
Right.
removed, however, in context, to be careful
Yeah.
that we're not dropping something.
Yeah. I agree.
And then addendum A,
Is gone
What's-
out. Okay. All right,
so I think we've gotten rid of all the addendums now, haven't we?
Well, we haven't,
We were gonna make a decision about the glossary at the end,
Yeah.
whether that would be useful or not.
I kinda like
All the others are gone.
Things too.
Well, that's where we could put some definitions, like
Yeah.
It's true.
youth
It's
voters
true.
and
erotic stuff. Okay, so how do we feel, like, I think, Hannah, so are you okay with like taking the main document and then just doing what needs to be done?
Yeah,
I don't
we
wanna-
might end up voting twice on something, like, because we've got changes we already approved, but then I think the cleaner thing will be to just vote on entire articles as we draft them.
Yeah, but you're feeling comfortable, like, not, like, overloading you or anything? Because some of this stuff, I'm assuming this is
Yeah, some of it, and most of it's already done, it's just a matter of consolidating it into one document.
Yeah, Peter.
Speaking to that, so I know that I had the best intentions of using that other document you had started and bringing forward the sections that we were working on because there were so many different places where it showed up. I know that created confusion, so apologies. And I think the best way, so I don't repeat that, is once I've circulated this thing where it's like we're each doing a piece of the follow-up on select board and town manager and finance. Once I've circulated that and we've agreed on who's doing what, I think that other than you, Hannah, if you do your pieces of that and embed them in this master document you're doing, I think that's fine. But for any of the rest of us who are producing pieces of it, I think we should produce pieces that are independent of that are just specific to the particular section or article that we're working on.
Yeah.
And that hopefully will help us not get confused again. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, and I think we can just sort of like drop those, like I think at some point we're just gonna have to go through and say like Article 1 is good as it is,
Yes.
Article
Yeah.
2 is, and then like that's just when that'll be what we.
Hopefully there's cutting and pasting at that point instead of something more complicated. Yep,
Yeah.
great,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, so we feel comfortable with what we just did. So I do, does everybody else feel okay?
Yes.
Yep.
And it's really great, I feel like we just did something exciting. Okay, now the non-citizen voting question, and, we had, I think and Maya was the one that said, let's put this on here, is, it came up at the last meeting about, some, was it South Burlington, and it's, how do we wanna move forward putting non-citizen voting in the charter?
Yeah, we had some discussion about if we put removing RTM separately do we wanna have a separate item for non-citizen voting? And I think we talked about it a little bit, and I asked to have it on the agenda because I think it's the wrong time for us to even be proposing it. Given the current climate. I mean, other towns have done it, but I think it's,
Now, do you mean the climate in the nation?
yes.
Now, how does that, and I'm sincerely asking this because I feel totally differently. What is that's going on in the country? How does that impact how we feel about non-citizen voting in the town of Brattleboro? And this is not like a trick question, so
Yeah,
I'm
no.
honestly trying to figure that out.
I understand that.
I've
I
thought
don't
about
wanna
this.
I don't wanna do anything, honestly, that would put anybody in jeopardy. And I'm afraid that if we have non-citizens registering to vote, that's public information, and that can make them vulnerable.
Yeah, but isn't that the choice of each individual, whether they want to register to vote or not? Because you're not automatically registered to vote. You have to take an action to vote, register to vote.
It also only allows legal citizens, like they're already known. Like they are green card holders or.
But they're arresting green card holders.
I mean, yeah, that's not, that they shouldn't be doing.
I understand that. I'm not
I-
saying that what they're
yeah,
doing is correct, I'm just saying, I don't think,
I just don't think that us putting them on a list makes them any more known than they would be otherwise, but I think that we should table this because it has the potential to drag down everything else we're trying to do. And I think it is an important enough issue that it should be dealt with at a later date on its own, like the youth citizen vote was.
Now, do you think I'm asking this question sincerely, do you think it's gonna drag it down locally? Oh, you think people in Brattleboro are gonna, because right now, in my mind, we've heard from 3 people who have said to us they don't like it. I actually believe, I haven't seen the controversy, I know the word controversy was used at the last meeting by a member of the public as the argument why we should have a separate vote on it. But I haven't seen any controversy about this, but that's just me.
I would say would love that we would be able to put it in. I am for tabling it. I believe we as a committee have not done enough homework or legwork to know that this is what is needed. I think a standalone article would be great. Brattleboro has non-citizen residents and they are active parts of the community, and I want them to be active parts of the community, and I want every avenue open, but we haven't done enough to know that this is needed at this time. And I would be the first one to sign up to help get to get it as a standalone, as going forward. But I think now it shouldn't be a part of the whole package.
I also don't think we've heard from a single non-citizen who has asked for this.
somebody was just on.
Yeah, raise their hand and then put it down, listen.
Oh, she's back. Do
She
you
don't
want
call
Alyssa
her.
come on? Does she want to come on? Yeah, we'll have Alyssa.
Hi, Alyssa Arroyo, RTM District 9. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I do agree with Joy about tabling it. I really don't think that it's appropriate for what is going on now in the conversation, especially because you already have a ton on your plate and you're trying to figure that all out. I don't think that you need to add that extra layer. And I just really do think, citizens are subject to, you know, um, laws and military duties and jury duties, which non-citizens aren't really subject to those responsibilities, those type of civic responsibilities. So I think being a registered voter, a citizen of the town, that's a huge role. That's very important. And I do think that sometimes non-citizens, they come and they go. So for them to be voting on something that they could possibly be, out of the area or moving within 6 months and not, experiencing, what they voted for or living in whatever they did vote for, that's a possibility too. So that's just my thought.
Thank you.
I move that we table non-citizen vote.
Second.
I'm just gonna tell you, I'm gonna vote against the motion.
Can I interrupt you?
Oh, yeah.
This time I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Usually I do that, a very bad,
Yeah.
rude habit. Because I don't think we need to further debate it.
Yeah.
We've heard 3 members of a 6-member panel state clearly that think that it's important that we table it. I don't think we need to have an affirmative action to do that. I think that as you bring forward the master document, it can just not have that piece in it. And that will, because also tabling is like tabling to win, but we're not gonna take it up further if what we're deciding is that it's not
That's
gonna be
true.
part of the package we're gonna bring. It just feels to me like the decision has been made and we don't have to have a further conversation about it. Sorry.
No, you're right. So you wanna get rid of your motion?
Yeah, I'm taking my motion back.
It never happened.
I just
Okay.
wanted to move the conversation
Okay.
along because I'm cold.
I know. Okay, so can we quickly look at what's happening next with our schedule?
Oh yeah, Kate and I need to do an agenda for next week.
Yeah, I mean, we're on for meeting
July 2nd.
July 2nd, and then again on, is it the 17th? I just might need this because it's trying to be organized.
We're meeting on the 2nd
And
and 17th.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things that we do. We need to figure out the select board and town manager stuff. That's a big one.
Can that be the 17th?
Yeah, we'll
Please.
put them on the 17th.
And then we can, because we're on the agenda for
Oh,
July
that's right.
8th. And
Yes,
so then we can tell them on July 8th that we're going to be taking that up at the 17th.
yes, yes.
David is racist.
Oh, David. And I'm assuming if we can try to get the finance committee, I'll see what I can get them.
Finance Committee and
Human
Human
Services.
Services on the 2nd.
No, that's next week. There's no way we're going to get those guys to tell us what they want by a week from today. You know what I mean? I mean, I could try, but.
Try. Yes, it's worth asking.
Why don't we ask?
We gotta do something sometime.
Yeah,
Even if we don't, with just one, if one of them could have a meeting between now and then,
yeah, we'll ask David.
and then
he's
come
on.
see us, that'd be good.
Yeah,
We might,
Is that David?
Yeah, I'm prepared to call a meeting of the finance committee for next Monday. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be away on the 17th, and so
Perfect. Okay, so
thank you.
you're gonna be on the agenda for July 2nd. Is that the date?
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Just
you,
made the
David.
whole day. Okay.
And Human Services is a maybe.
Maybe, I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
One of these, there's a whole bunch of other little things that we can, go through and clean up. We just have to go back through the list, because they're little things.
I can just, I mean, I probably can't get through the whole thing by next week, but I can at least start working on a master draft.
And then we can look
And
at it.
there are probably some sections that we can very easily
That would
deal
be
with.
great. Cause I think what it's gonna be too, Hannah, at some point, that's perfect, because we're gonna have to go through it
Right.
at some point, so we might as well start as opposed to reading through what we've already got done, then we're gonna figure out, oh, we forgot this thing.
Yeah.
So we can go through whatever you can get, is that okay to say on next Wednesday, we can
Yeah,
just go
I'll
through
do what
it?
I can.
Okay.
We'll just put it general on the agenda.
Yeah, because there's some things
We'll
like
just say
the
something like-
entirety of what is it, section 6,
Yeah.
just it's gone. And
God. Yeah, and now the other thing too, I sent this to everybody, but I wanna make sure we just state it out loud, that we're gonna be on the select board agenda on July 8th, and the purpose is for us to give them an update on where we are.
So we can discuss what we wanna say, we'll put that on the agenda for the second.
Yeah, but I'm gonna already have had, I don't know if I have to have a memo done. I'm doing a memo, Joy was gonna look at it, just really for the select board, giving the timeline of how long we have been working, what we have been doing, because we have to remember, there's 3 of them that are new, and we're not there when we got appointed. So I was gonna do it.
you should
Here.
include our flow chart. 'Cause
Yes, I'm gonna do the flow chart. I'm gonna include as much as humanly possible to make them really understand how the chart really worked. And then, because I went to the agenda setting committee meeting, and I'm here with Liz and Oscar and John Potter, and Bob Fisher was there. So, and I discussed with them that we were shooting for November 4th to have the election. So that's when they came up with, if we can get the finished draft that we want to them on September 9th, so they can look at it, so that then they come back for a special select board meeting. They were tentatively saying September 25th, because they want a couple weeks to digest what we were giving them. So I'm hoping that what we give them, they will accept, but they want time to decide whether they're gonna accept what we're giving them. So those are the dates we've come up with right now. And I did say, when we were there on July 8th, we could give them an update as to, because when I met with them, we still hadn't talked about RTM and where we were going. And so I think it's really, this is great tonight, because we have clarity on what our idea is for the annual town meeting moving forward. So, and we can put that on the July 2nd schedule as well, about
Yeah, I have discussed select board meeting.
Yeah.
I'll send you a draft.
Send me a draft, because there might be other little things that we can put on. But I'm feeling, and maybe you guys can pop burst the bubble, I am feeling like we can get this done by September 9th. But if somebody disagrees, like, tell me.
I think it's really good for us to have a deadline.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
and
thought
we
we
have
could do it.
meetings to the summer schedule, so
Yes.
I think we'll get there.
Yeah, and I think after, I think we can too.
And I think that the direction we're going actually requires a lot less revision. It's more just
taking stuff
Stuff
out.
out.
Get it written down and talk about whether we like how it reads.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we just have to wait until the 2026 legislative session.
Yes.
Maybe we'll be done by like summer 2026.
Party, we got confetti.
We're in the last year.
Boy.
Can I ask a stupid question?
No stupid, there are no stupid questions
What are we gonna do?
when it's over.
No, what are we going to do if
Don't
the
even say
voters,
it. Don't even say it, Maya.
I mean, do
Sorry.
we continue on or do the select board appoint a new committee?
God, I don't think we think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
we
like
can cross
we
that
bring
bridge.
forward our recommendation
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we're done, right?
Yes,
I believe.
I believe we are
Is
too.
there a reason why it's more complicated than that?
Well,
I don't know for 15
If-
years. and get a
if they, if the voters reject doing away with RTM,
Then I think that the charter just stays how it is.
it just stays
Yeah.
how it is.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is if they dissolve RTM but don't approve our new charter, then we have to, then we're in a little bit of a pickle.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just leave it, like, there's all this school board stuff and then it's moot, but I don't think we want to do that.
But, and,
But,
well, and but
Sorry.
the select board can re-adopt,
Yeah.
There's things that they can do.
To put pieces of it back in
Back
front
in
of the voters,
yeah.
if there's an understanding of why it went down.
Yeah.
That'll be tricky, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Sorry to raise
Wow.
that, but I just,
It's not.
I asked the question because I'm hoping
Yeah.
that I don't have to be on this for another year. I'm
Love you
being
too, Maya.
honest with you.
Okay, motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, we have to adjourn before, like, Maya quits right now. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.